Okay, Tumbleweed Joe. I saw your other video, by the way. Enough said. On metaphysics, I know a lot of ways through this jungle, right? I mean, I'm tempted just to say, that there's this tradition of skepticism, so it's never been a settled subject ever in the history of Western philosophy, but that is perhaps beside the point. But let's use a term that you used, the first principles. Now, if that's all we're talking about, principles that come first, fine. There's plenty of first principles. Yes, in mathematics. When I took a lot of math and physics courses when I was at school, I was taught that for something to be considered a mathematics, they're always creating a new hyperbolic mathematics or something. The law of identity has to be true. I think there's three rules, and the law of identity is one of them. So that makes that like a first principle of mathematics. An assumption, that's what we call that in skepticism. It's an assumption, a principal assumption. It's what if this is true, what it follows from it. And the issue is that first principle undeniably true, right? Is it you treat it as though it's axiomatic because you say we're going to assume it's true, but when you judge that in the context outside where you've assumed that it's true and you're questioning, is it true? Is it a self-causing kind of a justification, an a priori truth? Okay. And for it to be metaphysics, that's what it's supposed to be. It is fundamentally first. There is nothing that comes before it. Okay. So when you do Newtonian mathematics, you assume a kind of cause and effect. Fine, it came first. But eventually you learn things that make you question that preliminary assumption, right? You question it, you break it down, you change it, you improve it. Or you derive it from some other principle. Either way, there becomes a new first principle. That's the point. In skepticism, we believe that we're always getting new first principles, deeper and deeper and deeper into a subject, at least until we run out of room to dig deeper with that principle into that style of principle, and you have to have a whole new approach altogether. Okay? So this is what we're debating. I'm not trashing thousands of years of philosophy. Those human people, those philosophers were studying something. They were studying these first principles. It's just that as first principles, they could be very interesting and good things like the law of identity, law of cause and effect, and conservation of energy. And the fact of the matter is, they're still not true in a metaphysical way. They are not automatically or metaphysically true. Their truth, like the truth of any statement, is judged physically, right? Like how well do they match up to physical properties, okay? Where we also, in relativism, have our own definition of what it means to be physical, and it all relates to subjective impressions, ultimately. In other words, empiricism. I use my subjective impressions to try to triangulate on something I consider, more than just subjective, but it is built out of subjective. A brick building, you could say it's more than bricks, it's a shelter. Yeah, but it's also just bricks. All right. So this is the argument, really. Do the first principles, do you ever, when you're looking for first principles in metaphysics, in ontology, you can arrive at those things. In skepticism, you never arrive at the actual final first principle. There's always something beyond it. Your understanding is advancing. Your current understanding is your current understanding of principles. And this is why I say the principles are created by the human mind. They're our current model. They are a model. A painting of a horse is not meant to be the horse it's a painting of. It's a model or picture of. It's in parallel to this thing. So, that's what we're discussing. Now, those people might have discovered great principles. They may still be the first principles, or we might have gotten beyond them, or they might even not be on the track that we're looking anymore. It might be a first principle that invokes God, and we're not even looking anymore. And ultimately, this is the problem with metaphysics. All of the metaphysics. that you get in philosophy, analytic metaphysics. From my perspective, it looks as though we had a metaphysics. Yes, because I'm talking about the fact that I get in trouble saying that all this metaphysics is similar. The religious theistic metaphysics, is related to this analytic metaphysics. But from where I stand, it's like we had this religious metaphysics, and what happened is, when asked, why that metaphysics was true, we said because it was God's way, and that became not a good enough reason. God was not a high enough authority anymore, and it was sought a new authority. And the metaphysics and the ontological, the analytic metaphysics, or even the Platonic metaphysics, whichever you want to go with, the Aristotle style or Plato style or whatever. The idea when you're looking at it as metaphysics is that, well, there's no God, but God's domain, sort of these self-causing things, already exist. Now, you say it looks like I'm doing metaphysics. Yeah, I get that a lot. Well, why? Because I study first principles. I have foundational principles. For example, one set of first principles we all follow. We all have 99.99% same first principles. Why? What are they? Well, DNA. DNA is principles. They are principles of construction. Being a materialist, I notice that all of our conversations follow from the operation of DNA, even if they involve free will, which I believe. The DNA somehow creates the free will, right? Nothing without DNA shows any signs of free will. Now, it's possible that you could have something besides DNA. Probably there'd be an analog to DNA, but maybe it's possible even without an analog to DNA. But I've never seen it, in terms of what's apparent to me. Looks like DNA enables that. Now, that's one set of first principles. As a skeptic, my epistemology is based on a first principle that there is perception. It's happening. It's happening. I don't say I'm the one perceiving. I don't know if I'm causing the perceptions. I don't know where they come from. I just name it, existence. Being or becoming is this thing. I'd rather call it becoming because it's this constant flow of change is involved. It's a constant stream of new perceptions related to old ones, and there's patterns. They're always new. Okay, I name that existence. Okay, that's how I start. That's my first principle. So is that metaphysical? No, it's first principle, but the problem with calling it metaphysical is I use physics to judge that. 2,000 years ago, the idea that a skeptic had about, it being, existence being perception, that's a different thing than now with cognitive science and neurology and just a whole bunch of new perspectives on that. So that's changing. Our understanding of what it means for, our understanding of what we've named is changing. So it doesn't look like an a priori metaphysical truth. It looks like we named something and we're improving our understanding of it. And yeah, it's a first principle. We draw everything else from it. The existence of everything else, the existence of this roll of tape, is due to its interaction with me as part of this process of perception, of my perception, and so on. And so it's foundational. It's an assumption. And a lot of other assumptions that I make and live by are based on what if it's true, right? And I act on that assumption, that it could be true, and I act that way. But what if it's false? Yeah, it's still possible for it to be false. There is no unquestionable axiomatic nature to it. And there is no metaphysical principle from the law of cause and effect to anything else that you can present that doesn't change this way, isn't subject to change and modification. If you look at the source, what causes us to feel justified changing it, it's always the real physical world. Things going on in the real physical world inspire us to change these first principles and modify them. They might even have the same name because of the modification replaces the old one, or they might have a new name. Okay, but they do change in reaction to evidence. Evidence always being from the physical world. Okay, not the world of logic, but